All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Comedy Sports DNI Talks. I am your host, Luis Cortez, longtime comedy sports player both in Chicago and in Los Angeles, and now currently our Director of Diversity and Inclusion. Now, a few weeks ago, we started this show in order to introduce everyone to our ensemble, but also introduce everyone to their stories and experiences, not just within comedy sports, but also within the improv world, whether it be here in Chicago or anywhere else. We essentially are trying to make these conversations a little bit more everyday, a little bit more normalized, so that we stop repeating the mistakes of the past and start repeating all the great moves of the present. Today, I am joined by one of our ensemble members. We have been playing together for a few years now. And I mean, we're practically cut from the same cloth. Uh, Everybody, please welcome Jesse Gomez.
Hey Luis, how
How
are
are you, my
you?
friend? I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Although since we're cut from practically the same cloth, we both anticipated what each other's feelings were in this moment.
Yeah,
So
we just jumped right on top of each other's sandwiches. Uh,
yeah,
so yeah, for those of you that are not familiar with Jesse, Jesse, why don't you just to start off, introduce yourself, tell us
sure.
a little bit about yourself, and then where your improv journey started.
So Jesse Gomez. I'm born and raised in Chicago, so I'm a Chicago native, North Sider. With the exception, I lived in the Dominican Republic when I was in sixth and seventh grade, and I'm a product of Chicago public schools. I In my day job, I work in technology sales, so I've been in IT sales for about 12 years now. I currently work for a cybersecurity software company, so very exciting work. And before that, before my 12-year IT sales journey, I was a youth and family director at the YMCA of Metropolitan Chicago. So I spent the first part of my career working in social services, organizing and planning youth and family programming for the YMCA for a nonprofit. And then did an abrupt about face when I was about 28, 29 years old and went into the for-profit segment.
What
As
uh,
far
what
as improv goes,
what?
oh,
Pro-
sorry, go ahead, Luis.
I was just gonna ask, what prompted that change?
Sure. It literally lined up perfectly with me deciding that I was ready to start a family and getting engaged with my now wife. So yeah, I loved working for the YMCA. It still remains a really big part of my family's life. My daughter takes swim lessons there, dance classes. She attends youth sports programs. Um, so the Y is like a huge part of like my upbringing. Actually, it was really influential for me because my parents got divorced when I was 11. And so at those critical stages in my life, like the Y was pivotal in terms of, giving me something to do, right? Staying out of trouble, being able to identify mentors, connecting with folks that became lifelong friends. And the Y really helped me sort of get this, it started my sort of commitment to service and volunteerism, so yeah, just the why is great. I love it. And then yeah, and I also love being able to provide for my family financially,
Of
so
course.
not taking anything away from
What
IT sales,
what
but
a fun little treat.
yeah, right.
um,
Right, and not to say that I couldn't provide for my family working for the Y. It's just this has
no, I
been
get it.
different.
I
So
get it. You have expensive tastes. Um, so so
you've been to Luis. You've been to my house. You
that's
know.
that's why I'm saying that. Uh, so when did you start studying improv?
Yeah, so it's pretty funny. I didn't start taking improv classes till I was 30, which I only point that out because I was probably just a little bit probably later to the game than some of my peers, which is fine. But I actually didn't have much theater experience at all before taking my first improv class. I had dabbled a little bit. I remember signing up for like a theater workshop in high school. That was like over the summer for a couple of weeks. I don't even think I performed on stage during that time. It was just a lot of like, like script reading and memorizing monologues and stuff like that. and did not do it in college. And yeah, but I've always loved comedy. And I remember even as a young child, right, it was one of those things where I always wanted to do stand up. I always wanted to be on SNL, always as a kid, right? However, and I don't know if this is going to sound strange, I just didn't really understand what the path to a comedy career looked like.
There is nothing strange about that.
It's like, do you go to school for it? What do? Do you just show up somewhere and say, I would like a microphone? So it wasn't until I was 30, and let me backtrack a couple of steps. I remember there were a few false starts in my early to mid 20s where I was like, okay, I'm just going to do an open mic because I know that these are a thing that people do. However, lack of experience, lack of confidence, always prevented me from just taking that risk and just going an open mic, right? And so here I am, age 30. I'm at my corporate job, and one of my coworkers, I coincidentally enough, had gotten a Groupon to a comedy sports level 1 class. And so my buddy Michael, shout out to Michael Gardner, he invited me to take this class with him. Not to take advantage of the lucrative Groupon discount, mind you, because that had long since passed. But as Luis had already mentioned, I'm a man of expensive taste, so I paid full price for that level 1 class. And quite honestly, that's really what set everything off for me. I enjoyed it just from the jump, immersed myself in it, threw myself into it. And coincidentally, that was an 8-week class. And as that class was ending, they were holding auditions for the summer, at that time, what was Rec League.
So, like house party?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Trying to compare it to whatever current iteration we are in now. And so I auditioned for the Rec League pretty much on a lark because, again, at this point, my improv experience had amounted to eight weeks worth of classes. But I think my enthusiasm and sort of desire to want to be there got me cast on that summer Rec League program. And quite honestly, from there, it was just this constant sort of like, okay, I'm going to audition for these types of things. I'm going to start taking classes, not just at Comedy Sports, but then I started taking classes at Second City and at IO. And just really, just like so many other people, instantly became enamored with the thrill of being on stage, right? With the excitement of getting a laugh. And really, I really enjoyed the camaraderie between all these little sort of groups I'd be cast in, or folks that you'd meet in class. Because improv, I think for me, really sort of, it appeals to folks with a sense of sort of imagination, wonder, open-mindedness, sort of like, openness to sort of just accept some of the silly premises or situations you might find in improv. And so I really it came at a perfect time for me. I really feel like it really did.
So you had only done that level 1 8-week course before you ventured out to other theaters, or had you gone through more classes? Did you do anything after that level 1 class at Comedy Sports?
I went through the entire program at Comedy Sports. And so in terms of the timeline, I'd like to compartmentalize things. So I would only study at one theater at a time. Yes, because I didn't want to start sort of mixing philosophies and disciplines.
As you're learning them.
Right. And I also, that was based on some sort of feedback and guidance too that I'd received from instructors, which was, the common knowledge was you could go to a place like Second City, Comedy Sports, and IO to sort of learn the different rules and their styles, right? So you'd go to Comedy Sports to learn short form, you'd go to IO to learn long form, and you'd go to Second City to kind of learn how to do improv to sketch, right? That was sort of, and then the annoyance was there. Once you learned all the rules, you could go there to learn how to break the rules. That's at least sort of the guidance I was given early on.
Down for you.
Yes. Yeah. So I went through I never went through annoyance actually. And I've always wanted to. fun fact, it gets a lot harder to give up 3 hours a week of classes when you're helping raise a family and juggling different
Oh yeah.
responsibilities. So that's obviously, hopefully, knock on wood, I'll find time to, because I did actually, last January, I was feeling in a bit of a creative rut. And so I started talking to some folks who one, who know me as a performer, and one, and secondly, whose opinions I respect. And I was like, hey, where can I go to sort of break out of whatever sort of comfort zone I'm in? And so I ended up taking some classes with Bill Arnett last year at the Chicago Improv Studio, which is really nice. So only to say that, like, 10 years into this, 10 years into performing and taking classes, whomever is listening, I would always encourage you not to sort of settle into any sort of routine, but it's always a good time to learn, to revisit, skills, and also to broaden sort of who you're performing with, who you're learning from, who you're teaching. Because again, I'm getting ahead of myself, but even as an improv instructor, I feel like I learned so much by teaching that I can then apply to my own performances. So anyway.
So you started, remind me what year you started taking classes?
Let's see, it's 2010.
Okay, so you started classes 2010.
Yes.
Here we are, 2021. So
Yes.
you've now been performing for about 11 years.
Yes.
At which point did you start teaching?
Probably year 5 or 6, maybe.
Okay. And so there you are, about your halfway point. Had you felt before like you were ready to do it, or was it not until about 5-6 years in that you were like, okay, I think I can teach this now?
So at about the time I was offered an opportunity to teach, it's probably about 6 months to a year where I was telling myself I really want an opportunity to do this. So yes, to answer your question, I felt confident that I could do it, and somewhat ready to. But then again, that's altogether different than starting your first class where you're like,
Right.
okay, here I am,
Yeah, feeling like you can do it and then actually going to do it are two very different things.
You're like, wait, I have a lot of questions.
So let me ask you this. When you did start teaching, or when you started feeling that want, was that coming from a place of actually like you yourself, like, I really feel like I have things that I could teach? Or was it coming more for a place of, it seems like that's the next logical step as an improviser, so I should probably do that?
I think it comes out of this desire to do better and see better shows. That's really, Luis, it's all it comes down to for me. As you know, right? While I personally feel very committed to improvisation as a vocation, right, and as an art form and as a discipline, I'm in a different standpoint because I'm not necessarily chasing it as a full-time career.
Right.
And so for me, I try to look at all of this work through the lens of, is it good? Am I proud of it? Right? Like, would I want to share this with others? And am I happy? And am I having fun? So that's the kind of criteria I try and measure what types of opportunities I'm going to pursue, and how do I feel comfortable spending my free time. Am I proud of this? Like, if any Joe Schmo, not even any Joe Schmo, if anyone I respect is to consume this work, will I be satisfied?
I'll be okay with that.
Right. And then, yeah, man, am I still having fun? And so with teaching, it was mainly like, I think I've taken enough classes where the teacher doesn't seem necessarily invested in the work that myself and my classmates are doing. And that's always a huge bummer, just to be like, oh man, this person's really just here kind of killing time, waiting for their next audition or for their next thing.
They want their $50.
They want their $50. And then also, like, I've also had teachers, just, you see that they kind of hone in on who they're going to invest their time in, like weeks 1 or 2. They're like, oh, this is this person's destined for greatness. Let me make sure I'm developing this talent, and everyone else can kind of figure it out.
Yeah, let me hitch myself to that post.
Yeah, and it all just seems so frivolous. It's like, really, this is what we're doing here? So for me, it's like, I want to at least hope and think that I'm coming at it from like, good, honest, transparent intentions.
How would you say, having thought all that, it affected your teaching style?
Well, I will say that if you've ever taken a class from me, I'm not going to rub anyone's nose in anything that they've done. So meaning that if you make a move either in a scene or whatever that, that I want to give you critical notes on, I'm not going to try and make you feel bad about it. It's more so like, and that's my hope, right? That's my goal, is like, I genuinely want people to like learn and grow and get better. And I honestly, I want them to feel good. I want most of our interactions to be positive, right? And that's challenging because I'm not everyone's flavor, right? And so there's always that sort of thing where it's like, you can tell when you've got students that either don't like you, don't think you're funny, or don't respect you, right?
Right.
And so sometimes I feel myself fighting that urge to try and win them over. It's like, you're not going to be everyone's cup of tea, So instead it's like, all right, well, I still want to teach you. I still want to teach the whole group, right? So I'm trying to basically come at it from a place of positivity, right? And I want to build you up. I see some teachers and some instructors, right? Their mindset might be, let me tear you down and then build you up.
Back up, yeah.
I think that's total bullshit and BS. I don't know if we can swear, but I think it's total BS. I think that people do their best work when they feel empowered and when they feel valued. I'm hard pressed to find people doing their best work when they're under duress or feel, scared.
Scrutinized.
Place of fear. Yeah.
So now you've been teaching about what, 6-7 years in there.
Yeah,
occasionally get to coach or teach a class or something like that.
Sure.
What would you say? Would you say anything has changed since you started, style wise, process wise, or maybe you're trying to move up towards XYZ, or are you in a place right now where I feel like I've hit a nice stride for now?
I think that at the beginning, I was more comfortable giving like direct individual feedback and notes. I think now I've gotten to a place where I can make observations, and rather than just strictly apply them to the individual, I can sort of take those notes and observations, apply them to the group at large, and hopefully, right, then that's more beneficial for everyone versus sort of making an observation, to an individual, just sort of applying that to like, the group at large. So I find myself doing that a lot more. I think just by virtue of experience, the toolbox is a little bit bigger in terms of exercises and warm-ups and games that I know now and I can play, and employ with different classes. I think being able to identify the overall feeling of a group and what direction they might want to go in, whether that's implied or whether they explicitly tell me, I feel a little bit more confident to sort of pivot and adapt. I think early on it was like, okay, here's a lesson plan. I want to get through as much of this lesson plan as possible, right? I think now I feel a little more comfortable sort of, adapting to what the group wants or what the general feeling is.
When do you feel like you take a similar approach when you coach a team, in the sense of, obviously you have an idea of where you want to take them, but as you observe more and more and more, do you feel like you adapt and kind of ebb and flow per like the individuals and the team as a whole? Or
yeah, I think you have to, right? So I think, okay, so a couple of things for me in terms of being an improv coach and what my approach is. My approach number one is, how can I get this random collection of people, how can I get them to to coalesce and to come together as a group? So I think that's kind of like the first sort of goal, but that goal is sort of ongoing, right? And so it's like, we all do this, right? So, hey, first step is, can I get these people together either physically or virtually, right? I haven't coached in the virtual world, so I can't speak to that. I've taught classes and workshops in the virtual world, but I haven't coached. But again, previously, it's like, let me get these people together as quickly as possible. We all need to get to know one another, right? On a deeper level, less superficial level. So a lot of those exercises in the first few weeks are, let's all get to know one another. Let's all maybe break bread together and gather somewhere outside of the theater or outside of the rehearsal space. And then once you identify who the personnel is, then we start saying, okay, how can we work on skills that will play to our strengths while simultaneously doing exercises that will help us in areas that we're super deficient? Because 9 times out of 10, you get this group of folks together and they all want to focus on the things that they do well. And they're very reluctant to try the things that they traditionally haven't had as much luck or success with. And so obviously as that coach, I'm like, no, this is great. Hey, you're all musical improv rock stars. And I love that. But we need to work on these pun games, perhaps, because you all seem to have an aversion to it, or some of you do. And so I'm simultaneously trying to help them produce a show that showcases their talents, but also not letting go of the fact, right, that we're not going to get better if we don't do these things we suck at today. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it totally does. Yeah. No, and it's just a nice breakdown of essentially like your teaching philosophy and how you like to not just approach the team, but the individuals as well. Um, so moving over to more of your performance stuff, let me ask you this: do you, considering you have this 9 to 5 career, and you came in more in the sense of like I guess using it just get away from work and all that stuff. Do you consider yourself like performer slash actor slash improviser, or is it just like this is just kind of a thing I do and I've become inundated in it, but it's not like that's not me?
No, it very much is me, and I think, Luis, it's such a funny thing that you brought that up, because I think early on, whenever I wanted to invest more time and energy into performing, I would back off and I would tell myself, hey, you're not an actor, you're just a hobbyist. And I think that was in part because I didn't have the confidence, and also because I hadn't been able to gain access to certain opportunities that I wanted at that part as well. So it's partially me psyching myself out, and partially gatekeepers telling me that I wasn't, worthy of considering myself a legitimate improviser, actor, performer. Since then, I've learned that success is relative, number one, right? And then, I just, there's, how many spots are there in SNL? There's 10, but how many improvisers are there, actors out there in the world, comedians out there in the world, right?
Yeah.
Tens of thousands, right? So you can't let jobs define you, and you can't let just opportunities that you've had define you. I think the only thing that you can let define you is the work that you do on stage. And I can say fairly confidently that I hold my own, and I really like the work I do most of the time. And that's different than when I first started. Man, I'd finish up some student show or a rec league show, and I'd be in the car. My poor wife is sitting next to me, and I'm analyzing every single thing that I did. It's like, oh, if only I could have said this in that moment or done something different. And I can confidently say now that I don't. I just come away with it, and it's like, did I have fun? Did I not have fun? Hey, okay, cool. If there was something either that a cue that something that I missed, or you acknowledge it, you take note of it. At least I do, right? I acknowledge it, take note of it, and I just keep it moving. And so I'm at the place now where it's like, yeah, I'm a performer, because also people are multifaceted. People, are so many things. in a given moment, in a given day, in a given week, right? We hold all these different roles. So, like the fact that all 100% of my income is not derived from performing doesn't make me any less than a performer than someone, who admirably has committed themselves, right, to doing this full time. Because that's the other thing too, is like, I have just so much respect and admiration for anyone in any sort of industry that is self-sufficient, right? That puts themselves out there as a self-proprietor, small business owner, a contractor, just anyone that is like, you know what? This is my vocation. This is my chosen path. I'm going to go for it, right? Like that takes so much like strength, and admittedly, like, I have those driveway moments when I'm like, oh man, how far could I go if I push this 100%, And so, there's a lot of like strength in people that are able to do that, do it full time. But again, yeah, I mean, I fortunately for me, I don't have many doubts, right now in myself. I mean, I think if we were to have this conversation 5, 6, 7 years ago, I mean, the answers would vary widely.
Oh, totally, yeah. Yeah, I think also a part of that falls into just like you were saying, like the gatekeepers giving you that feeling of like, if you're not, closing down the bar every night and doing midnight shows and part of 8 teams, then you're not really an improviser. And that's what I think can trigger that sort of like imposter syndrome of, I don't belong here, I'm not supposed to be here. And being, someone who was able to commit myself to improv in that way and still have those thoughts to this day. Even when I landed in Chicago, I was just like, despite having like conquered the LA improv world, I land here and I'm just like, I'm not a Chicago improviser. This is not going to work for me. I don't even know why I'm here. And it's just like, you just did 2 years on like Second City ships, and now here you are like, I don't know. But that was, again, that imposter syndrome triggering in my head of like, this isn't for you. You should have stayed put, despite having like done and had good success in my career in LA. I was still like, no. I'm just a guy.
Oh, don't worry, Luis. When you showed up to Chicago, that was not apparent to any of us. You came in with a ton of confidence. As a matter of fact, I was like, who the heck does this guy think he is? Just waltzing in here with 15 years of experience, just being good.
I will tell you that it was really rough to like just plug myself in, because I really just like, I just want to come in as like a guy. I just want to be a guy, and I would play with everyone. But like, I would jump into my class, like I did conservatory when I landed here in Chicago, and the teachers, for whatever reason, felt it necessary to announce to the class, hey, just so you guys know, Luis just got off 2 years of ships and he's been improvising for 15 years.
You're like, thanks.
Like, why? Why can't I just be a guy? Why do you have to throw that around? Because the thing that people would immediately ask me would essentially be like, why are you in class? You've already done the ships. To which I was like, if your goal being here is the ships, and similar to what you just said, at that moment it was like, we have 3 ships left, which means at any time there are 20 people out there doing these, and you're one of thousands. So there's a good chance that a lot of us aren't going to do this. And if your whole world is turning on that, like, you're going to be very disappointed for a very long time in this industry because of how many no's we hear. Like, the no is the rule, it's not the exception. The yes is the exception. And so seeing people approaching it already, it's like we were at level 2, and that's where like ships. And of course, a year later, ships were gone. So it was just like, well, now what are most of these people going to do? Yeah. I think the only reason I was able to come in with such vibrato was because it was comedy sports. Like, I did comedy.
I'm just messing.
I know comedy sports here. Oh, I know. But also, what was so weird for me was I made it onto my rec league team, but immediately they were like, "Hey, can we use you for remotes and buyouts and stuff?" And so I was like, I mean, yeah, of course. I want
Sure.
money and I want to perform. But then immediately,
They
like,
thought you were skipping the line.
my class and my
Yeah.
team and everyone was like, "Who's this fucking
Right.
guy?" I'm just like, I would say it took me probably a good year to feel comfortable and like I actually had friends after landing here in Chicago. But I'm also, despite how loud and obnoxious I can be, I'm quite introverted when it comes to meeting new people.
I know,
So,
buddy.
thanks, man. I appreciate that. Um, so, what was your first rec league team?
Oh, okay. My first rec league team was called Green Beans.
Okay,
Yes, and
who was your coach?
oh, who was my coach? It was probably Melissa Cathcart,
Okay,
because honestly, it's really funny. For a period of like 4 or 5 years, for whatever reason, I would always end up on teams with Melissa or Tim Wedham. And so Tim Wedham is now in San Jose, and he performs with Comedy Sports San Jose. So shout out to Tim Wedham, and to Melissa Cathcart. Melissa is no longer performing now, but she's raising a couple beautiful kids and has a lovely career. And yeah, those folks were great. Like for me, and it was again kind of funny that I ended up like. So Melissa coached me on green beans, and I think this is how it happens too, right? Is then she was also coaching a team at the playground called Recess, and was like, "Yo, you should audition for this thing, right?" And so then, because that's the thing too, is like sometimes you end up working with a lot of the same people because that's how you're hearing about some of these opportunities, or some of these people are just putting a word in for you, or recommending you to these things. To this day, was it 2018? 2018, I had two really weird, like, validating moments as an improviser. These weren't necessarily opportunities to perform. I did not earn money, but there were just two little things that happened where I was like, oh, okay, I'm not an imposter. So one was an anonymous person. I still don't know who did it to this day. So if you're out there watching, please let me know because I want to thank you. But someone had put my name into the improvised Shakespeare, and they said, Jesse Gomez is great. You should see him. So um, Improvised Shakes had these like invite only auditions, and I got to go, and I didn't get a job. Well, technically, who knows? They did tell me just to wait around my phone. They were like literally like, we may call you next week, next month, we may call you next year. So they might still
you
call
might
me.
still call.
Right. But that was kind of neat because I just, I didn't see myself sort of in that circle per se. So that was just, again, flattering. And then there's another one where I was doing a show with our dear friend Lou Leonardo, and Lou and I are sitting on the bench at Comedy Sports, and he's like elbowing me, and he's like, who is that sitting in the front? And I was like, I don't know. He goes, that person looks really familiar. That person looks really familiar. And he keeps elbowing me. I'm like, I don't know who it is. I go out. I have a really great show because I'm not concerned with the person sitting in the front row because I don't know who this person is. And so I'm just playing free and loose. And then afterwards, that person comes, shakes my hand, and tells me that I did a great job, right? And Lou goes, that person had something to do with casting at Second City. And I was like, oh, cool. Well, that's really nice too, because I've never done Second City general auditions, but it was nice to see that someone who has seen, a lot of performances took note of mine. And so, that's just those really weird like things that just happen where you're like, oh, there's people are always watching you. And even if you don't have a direct interaction with those people, or you don't know who those people are, they might know who you are. So it's always a good lesson of like, be kind, be gracious, try to sort of check that ego a little bit, because you just never necessarily know who's watching or what they're saying about you. And so again, those kind of moments are cool because it's like, oh, even if I don't like, I'm not the most social improviser out there. I'm not a part of different circles or cliques or groups. And so sometimes, right? And so sometimes you're just like, it's nice to just hear like, oh yeah, like you're respected at the very least,
Oh yeah, no, totally. One of my favorite moments in that vein when I was a much younger improviser was, since I'd been doing comedy sports from the beginning. Um, I was at one of the world championships. I think it was in Philadelphia. This was years ago, but Dick Chudnow, the CEO and creator of comedy sports, uh, he just sidles up to me. We'd just done a show. He sidles up to me. He puts his arm around me as we're walking back to the hotel, and he just goes, "You know what you did tonight? That's exactly what I pictured when I invented comedy sports." And I was just like, ah, what? Ah! Like, it was just one of those very validating moments where, like, I got it from the horse's mouth.
And then
Tonight,
he
I did
stuck
it right.
he stuck a needle in your
Yeah, and
arm
then
and
a
like pulled
needle
your
in my
DNA
neck.
out.
Yeah. And I woke up brown.
Right.
Uh, um,
Oh god.
so, so obviously, you've been performing for a while, and you've been essentially, from what it sounds like, part of comedy sports that whole time.
Mm.
In that entire time that you've been here, from your inception in the rec league all the way to ensemble, and what year did you move up to the ensemble?
2016.
2016.
Yeah, fun fact, I auditioned 7 times.
Wow,
I
seven
auditioned
times.
7 times before I got cast, 6 times before I got a callback. So on my seventh and final time, I got a callback. And it's very funny because that seventh year, I had submitted my availability for auditions and then immediately regretted it and said, you know what? I don't want to do this. I don't want to face rejection again, etc. And then attempted to withdraw my audition slot and was told by the artistic director at the time that they'd really like to see me. So if I can make it, that I should make it. And I was like, you know what? Okay, I'll go in. So
Here you are.
yeah, that's that.
What sort of, if any, changes have you seen in that time at the theater?
A lot. Yeah, a lot. I think since I started taking classes at Comedy Sports, we've had there have been 4 different artistic directors. Um, I've just seen the cast go through a huge transformation. The culture of the theater, and I mean, it's just it's natural, right? That things would change over the course of 10 or 11 years.
You would hope.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say like, I mean, just strictly from a diversity and inclusion perspective, right? Like when I first started taking classes, it was pretty much the majority all white people, you know, teaching, taking, performing, etc. Yeah, I think we obviously still have a lot of work to do in terms of making this cast more representative of our community at large, but you know, we're getting there, and I think you know, we have enough to field a whole show, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we all remarked, you know, not too long
Those are
ago.
such little, like, they feel like a big milestone. You don't want to make it a big milestone because it's not like
I do.
well,
Celebrate it.
to me, I'm just like, I want it to be normal. I don't want it to be this like, wow, but it's
Yeah.
got to start somewhere. So I get that. I mean, and I think an important thing to point out is, you said it yourself. In the time that you've been here, we've had 4 artistic directors. That benefits us to a certain extent because, like with other comedy sports, and it's not about throwing anybody under the bus, but like their owners are also their artistic directors because they don't have the abundance of performers and stuff that we have here. So a lot of them have been in that position for 20, 30 years. And so
Yeah.
when these D&I things come up, I see why it's hard to not take it personally because it's literally everything I've done for the last 20 years has been wrong. And it's like, obviously, don't take it that way, but it's more, there are things that you weren't able to focus on or chose not to, or whatever the reason may be. But when, we have someone like, say, Jason comes in and he's like, well, I've been here a year. What do you think we should do? It's like, well, I think we should do this. Great, let's do it. Because they don't have 20, 30 years behind them where they feel like they have to answer for it.
Of course.
but it has helped us in that way in order to be able to change, but also hinders us because we don't have that standard structure for so long that we have to keep updating everything every few years.
Yeah, institutional knowledge has its benefits, right? But if it's the only knowledge that we hold, it is extremely limiting and filled with blind spots, right? So it's that sort of the combination of we're also lucky, even though we've had 4 different ADs, and right, and you mentioned right, Jason, doesn't have that extensive comedy sports history. We also benefit from the fact of having ensemble members that have literally been here since the beginning.
Yeah.
And without those folks, what you would see is, you'd lose out on a lot of the traditions that I think that make us a special place to perform at, right? So it's really just a friend of ours and current ensemble member and I were chatting, and they put it best. It's like, hopefully, whenever you get a new artistic director, that person is bringing what you need for right now, right?
Yeah.
And that and then it's not an overcorrection of what the last
The last person did.
last person was doing. That it's really just like, okay, that incrementally we start adding these pieces, right? Like like we're for a few months we're almost exclusively focused on show quality, right? And we're really working really hard to make sure that this show is tight and polished and working on all cylinders. But then if we're focusing too much on that, maybe we're losing out on just the soft skills, right? The culture, just checking in with people, on a more individual basis. So it's really just being able to understand what a very needy group of 50 to 60 actors and comedians want on a daily basis. Oh yeah, emphasize the needy part, right? And to be able to deliver that, that's a challenge, man.
And also, lest we forget, like, though Jason came in with not a lot of comedy sports experience, he had decades of experience as an AD.
Right. Yes.
So, like, the comedy sports stuff we can teach. Like,
yeah, for sure.
decades of experience as an artistic director, that's what we wanted.
It's a demanding job that has a lot of different
moving parts,
necessary skill sets and moving parts. And yeah, so I don't envy that job, not in the least.
Well, tell you what, Jesse. Believe it or not, we're coming towards the end of our time.
No, I refuse to accept that.
Right? Time is a weird constant. But let me ask you this, and this is something that we can go into detail when we bring you back the next time. But you yourself are a dad. I've had the pleasure of meeting your daughter. She's amazing. She's adorable. But let's say, and this is a question that I posed to Miguel as well. Let's say somewhere down the line, she decides to become an improviser like her dad. What sort of changes would you like to see instituted by then so that she doesn't have to go through the same stuff that you did?
Okay. Well, I think being that that I identify as male and Lucy identifies as female, right? I think that what I went through is, I don't think that her experience
would be
completely different. So what my wish for her is that, I've observed it, and I've also, have had friends, right, recount their stories of people in a position of authority taking advantage of, young women, etc. Right? Like, so I think that with improv, I think that what we need to get away from is fetishizing institutions, number one. So, getting back to that sort of letting the gatekeepers dictate your value and your worth. So I want my daughter to grow up knowing her value, knowing her worth, and not letting any other person, outside force, trying to determine that for her. So right off the jump, what I guess I'm trying to say is that I hope that my daughter grows up to be self-sufficient enough to not need validation from, some institution, whatever it may be.
Right.
So if she decides to do improv, I'm happy for her because it has brought me a lot of joy, and I wouldn't want to deny that joy for her. But I would want her to approach the work from a place of honesty, love, right? And just clear-headedness. And I would never want her to go into the arts chasing fame, fortune, and adulation from strangers. I would want her to do it because it, it brings value to her life, whether that's emotionally, intellectually, socially, etc. So I don't know if that helps answer your question,
No,
but
it very much does.
yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want for my daughter is I just, I think that's what everyone wants for their children, right? Is for them to be happy. But I also think that, you know, um, as someone who identifies as Latinx, as someone, she identifies as female, I think there are additional challenges and obstacles, right, to sort of navigate and to overcome. Ultimately, I'm still a white passing dude, and I've got it easier than, 80% of the people out there, right? So, I can't paint a picture that I've struggled immensely. I mean, I've had my fair share of struggles, right? And some of those have come solely to the fact that my parents were immigrants and didn't speak the language and things like that. But I think that, I've got that unique advantage of perspective, right? And can kind of already identify maybe certain pitfalls and maybe remove some of those barriers out of the way so she doesn't have to trip over them. But at the same time, I can't, I can't walk that journey for her. So
Of course. No,
I need to prepare her,
What I liked about your answer was I asked you essentially, what are the changes to the institutions? And you responded with, I think what we should focus more on is strengthening the spirits of the students, the people. You humanized it, which is really, it really is the focus. We focus so much on what do the theaters need to do, what do the buildings have to blah 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 blah, as opposed to the people that are making these decisions.
Who cares about these buildings?
Right.
I don't. I mean, really, it's like.
Oh, I mean, we've proven for the last few months
right.
we don't need them.
Oh, but I mean, but when we all first started out down this journey, all we could think about was the buildings. Oh man, can I get into IO and perform on the on the main stage there? Can I get into Second City, perform on the main stage there? Can I get on Comedy Sports to perform on their main stage? Where it's like, yeah, I mean, those opportunities are great, but it doesn't define who you are as a performer. As a matter of fact, some of the people whose comedy I love the most is sort of inspired and comes out of rejection from the mainstream, right? And so it's like, ugh, if anything, like it's like it's weird, right? Nowadays there are the quote unquote opportunities are abundant in the sense that like you can do comedy on TikTok, right? You could set up a YouTube channel, right? You could do sketches with your pals in your backyard on your iPhone. And so there are so many more paths and like opportunities, but that also seems more overwhelming. Like I'm sitting here as a 41-year-old man and I'm like, what do I do during quarantine? How do I make myself relevant? So it's really funny that way. But I think that this has proven that institutions are almost irrelevant or not. I mean, they're irrelevant in the sense they can help launch people to a larger platform, but
it really is like, don't focus so much on buildings and institutions and just find your people and get to work. No, I like that. I like that quite a bit. Jesse, this was great. We're definitely going to have you back. I want to hear more specifically on navigating both all of this improv stuff and being a dad and being a parent. But like I said, we're going to have a specific one to that, and I'll contact you on that one. But this has been great. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. Please follow us on Twitch. Go ahead and find our channel on there. We perform Wednesdays and Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays as well. You can see the schedule on there. Please find us on Facebook. Please find us on Instagram. You can also watch all the other DNI talks on YouTube, so please find our YouTube channel on there, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much, Jesse, and thank you everyone out there. We'll see you next time.